And I'm going to get taunted from the couch the whole time. What could possibly go wrong?
Are you recording yet?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Sorry. Good morning to the 5 people who showed up, and the 3 of you look like you're working on a CTF, so great. All right. So for those of you who came, this is how to not cheat on your spouse, what Ashley Madison can teach you about OpSec. To give you a little bit of overview, I was having a conversation not long after the dump came out and everybody was kind of trolling through it looking for their neighbors and their friends and everyone else with one of my friends, and we were like, well, this seems like a lot of people just completely and totally failed at, at managing their identity online, because if you're going to cheat on your spouse, does the person you're going to cheat with really need to know anything about you? So that kind of led to this talk and led to me looking through the data to figure out who kind of sort of got it right when they decided to go cheat on their significant other. So a little bit about me. Go by the Lost Knowledge is my handle. It's my old Twitter profile picture, but I'm a giant nerd. I love Star Wars. I love Legos. Yes, Legos. Who doesn't love Legos? Part of a group in Northern Virginia called Nova Hackers. Even after having just moved out from that area, know a lot of great guys I've from there. So a couple years ago, I actually had somebody at a former employer ask me for a disclaimer. So now I always include disclaimers in my talks because apparently people might know who I work for. So, as always, all views and opinions contained within this presentation are my own. They do not represent the beliefs or opinions of my employer or any other affiliated organizations.
Or his wife.
Yeah. Thanks. That's where slide 2 comes in. I have another disclaimer on this one in particular. So all information presented here in this presentation is for informational purposes only. I do not advocate that you perform any illegal activities or cheat on your significant other. Furthermore, I do not claim that any methods I discuss here will ensure you stay out of trouble, though it'll probably make it slightly more likely you will. So, in case you were living under a cave for the last, 6 months or so, just a little bit of background on what OpSec is, what's Ashley Madison, right? Yeah. So for people who don't know what the term,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, get on the couch.
Get up and interrupt his talk by walking on
I
stage.
just
and being
did.
jacked. I'm sorry.
It's all right. So OpSec is short for Operation Security, comes from military terminology, but the components of it are situational awareness. In this case in particular, we're talking about situational awareness, protecting your identity, protecting your information. If you want to ensure that what you're going to do isn't going to get you in trouble, isn't going to get you caught, in the military sense, it's usually more about making sure people don't get killed. In this case, it's probably more likely keeping you from getting divorced or getting killed is also quite possible. So Ashley Madison, for those who don't know, was a alternative dating site, we'll call it. One of their many mottos was "Life is short, have an affair." So they got this reputation as being the site to go to for cheating on your significant other. There's many adult dating sites out there, but this one in particular seemed to go for that one angle. There are others that also take that angle. There are lots of reports of scams, fake accounts, and so the result, a few months ago they got hacked by a group calling themselves the Impact Team. So there's a lot of ifs and what ifs, and I don't know at this point that anybody's actually identified who the hell they are. It could be anybody, but I'm not going to play the clue attribution version. It's just not worth it. Just a few other notes I kind of want to go over. A lot of people did try to go through and identify users, and so it's obviously a very hard thing to do to look at that and say, oh, well, I know that, this person here was on the website because, they registered with their email address. Well, Ashley Madison did zero validation of email addresses, so there's a lot of people on there who are registered who aren't actually registered. And IP addresses are obviously poor indicators. I think the biggest exposures to people who were on this list are the people who were doing credit purchases, just because there was far more information for those people than anybody else. I will say I have not identified openly any actual users of the Ashley Madisons. I'm not into the public shaming, and I was more interested in the stats and looking at kind of the bulk data. Something else, so I went looking around. A lot of political cartoons had to do with Ashley Madison for some reason. I wonder why. So I'm not a fan of public shaming. There's also a lot of public shaming pictures on the internet, I learned. So I have time on the internet, and I find things. I like this one. I don't know. It's always such a thoughtful looking penguin. So the last thing is the fake accounts. So I went through the list, and using the IPs as one of the prime indicators, there's, granted it's not always perfect, but there were 65,000 accounts that tied to another kind of similar site, dates in your city. The IP was registered, the accounts were registered with belonged to them. There's another 30,000 plus from JDI Dating, which if you do some Googling, you'll see some very sketchy and scammy things that they've done. A lot of IPs reporting back to 127.0.0.1, so obviously they were doing a great job of validating validating IPs. And then there was 228,000 accounts that had IPs that tied back to an Ashley Madison IP address. So.
Was that just an account, or was there actually like a page? I'm actually unfamiliar with the Ashley Madison website internally, luckily. Was it just an email address and an account set up? Or what?
So looking through the data dump, basically they have a bunch of registration items, and based on the variance across the different profiles, a lot of it was optional. You could basically get by giving an email and then kind of just filling out what you wanted. They didn't have like, oh, you need to provide us every last little bit of information about your life. But one of the things they were apparently capturing was your IP address when you were doing registration, though it's not consistent and it's not there for all the accounts. So that was one of the indicators in this case, looking for the fake accounts that I used. Digging through the emails is particularly hard because not only do you find lots of potential legitimate ones, but if you do a search for, hey, I want to find everybody who registered with Gmail, so there's going to be a couple million responses back, right? Now, how many of those are even legit? I mean, you can kind of do a cursory look through and you'll see a lot of like, here's gibberish letters I just pounded my keyboard and put at gmail.com. And that's actually something I'll kind of talk about in one of my later slides too. Because they weren't doing any validation, trying to, the race by everybody to try to find out who was using it was kind of a little bit, silly. But it was also kind of fun for people, right?
Hey. So I haven't looked at the dumps,
Mm-hmm.
but are they strictly Ashley Madison accounts? Was the dump strictly Ashley Madison?
It appears to be. I don't know without looking at the original source right off. It's because basically they're all straight SQL dumps. Like you could turn this back around and shove it back into an SQL database.
Yeah, I mean, and to clarify for anybody that's not familiar, the overarching company that owns Ashley Madison owns several other sites as well. I just didn't know what got dumped.
Yeah. No, I mean, going based solely off the file names and the information that was provided, it appears to strictly be Ashley Madison accounts, but there could be other stuff thrown in the database structure too. So some operational security for not cheating on your spouse. I kind of identified 4 plans. Create a plan for protecting your identity, creating a plan for burning your identity, Acquiring materials for plan execution and executing your plan is obviously the last step. And profit might be on there somewhere too. Some people are going to ask, do I need a burn plan? As with a lot of this, a lot of what you have to decide when you're going to go through this is risk assessment, right? If you're cheating on your spouse and you're trying to figure out, well, I don't want to get caught, how much paranoia are you going to have that your spouse is going to be able to figure out what you did, right? And that's using this as the prime example. It's if you're dating somebody who does digital forensics and is frequently like testifies at court cases and stuff like that and knows what they're doing, probably gonna want to be more paranoid than say if you were dating somebody who was a nurse or something like that and who may not have as much technical background and may not know as much about computers and know as much about tracking and what you were doing online, right? But you definitely don't want to have your address sitting in the Ashley Madison dump that any idiot can go push through. And in fact, a lot of people made it a lot easier. When we were living in Northern Virginia, there was a local kind of message board that people used in the area where somebody basically had gone through the credit dumps and sorted and put the different bits and pieces based on area. So like, hey, I want to see the people who were in Fairfax, Virginia, who were on this list. They took that credit dump and just spit that list out into the message board. And then they did the same thing for, the other major cities in the DC metro area. And so they took all this information and dumped it out. And so now it was easy enough for anybody, with half a brain to go, oh, wow, here's this list of all these people. I can just go, let's go see if Bob's on it, right? So trying to troll through this information in its raw dump form, the credit transactions are pretty easy to look through because they're all just comma-separated files. So you can kind of go through and read through that. But to look through the profile information, like I said, it's a SQL dump. So without throwing it back into a database, it's hideous to go through. It's a pain to go through, and it's gigs and gigs and gigs of data. So people making it slightly more accessible for others kind of means that, you have to be slightly more concerned, I guess. The other side to this, to your burn plan, is having physical connections to things, right? So if you're doing anything, whether this is cheating on your spouse, if you're going to go do some borderline illegal, or if you're going to do, let's just use security research as an example that doesn't sound quite as legally bad. So you're going to go do some security research, and you have a concern that either the research you're going to do may not be well received, or that people might not respect you when you responsibly disclose whatever problems they have. Having a physical connection to something that they can go back and say, oh, we found this person when they were on our, attacking. We were able to go back and see where somebody would come in and try to attack our system or try to attack our service. Oh, and guess what? They did it from their home IP. You're going to get, you're going to have problems, right? So this goes back to who cares if I get caught, right? So, your ISPs, they might care, if they're actually even looking to see what suspicious stuff that may or may not be going on their networks. The companies who you're researching against, who you may be attacking or trying to, determine if their stuff is secure and working. If it's something really illegal, the FBI, your state police, your local police, and if you're just trying to cheat your spouse with a frying pan. So, and apparently this was a stock image on the internet, and predated Ashley Madison, so somebody knew that was a thing.
When you see that, you'd much rather see the symbol to the left, definitely.
Yeah.
So it'll look less frightening.
Yeah. So I wanted to discuss two classic kind of OpSec failures, how a hacker can become infamous. If you're going to do stupid shit and you're going to hack people, please don't put pictures of your girlfriend's tits and ass on the internet and expect not to get caught. In this case, for anybody who didn't, who anybody doesn't remember, so Warmer and the cabin crew guys were down in Australia, I think it was, somewhere on the other side of the planet. But one of the things that wound up getting him caught was they pulled the EXIF data out when he was doing the taunting, and figured out what kind of phone he was using, and using that information and some other bits and pieces from the internet, was able to figure out who the hell he was. And he eventually got busted. So if you're going to taunt, for the love of God, don't put pictures with EXIF data on the internet. Now, granted, this probably wouldn't happen as much now because Twitter does scrub EXIF when it gets posted now.
So what you're saying is literally he posted images raw with EXIF data on the internet.
Yeah. So it didn't have like geolock in it, but it had like, oh, this was taken with this iPhone, blah blah blah, whatever, and had enough information they were able to use that when they caught him to tie it back to him and make him look ridiculous. So the other example.
Everybody only has one phone.
Yes, yeah. Everybody only, yes, I don't know why. So the other one, whether or not you believe that the FBI actually caught the real guy, as I like to put it, either he's the biggest patsy and idiot in the history of mankind, or had some of the worst OpSec in the history of mankind. When some of the evidence that was wound up used against him in trial included the fact that he used his real image on fake IDs that they intercepted on their way to him. If you're using fake IDs to purchase shit through the internet, you don't have to put your picture on it. There's a little hint. I've purchased domains through the internet before, been required to provide an ID. I didn't have to provide any visual proof that I was the person whose picture was on the ID. I just had to provide an ID that matched whatever card information I gave them.
No, not for nothing, but if somebody wanted to do that, what type of ID did you provide?
So in that case, the company that wanted it, the company that was requesting it requested a driver's license in that case. But I think that was, there are other cases where they'll provide, they'll take other IDs, but usually they want something that is they consider, what's the word I want to look for, official. So they want to see something that was issued by a government agency that they can clearly say, okay, this looks real. And if somebody went and faked it, they did a hell of a lot more work than, say you or I could do with our badge printers and printing somebody's, fake work badge or something, right? Yeah.
I have never printed a fake ID in my life.
I want to know which driver's license
Where did you get your license on that? Just curious.
So mine was all legitimate when I did it. So I have never used, I would like to state I have never used a fake ID. So,
Bad old. Where's my camera?
so, it's, the reality is, right, that if you're, for most of the stuff that you're going to want to do on the internet, odds are you're not going to need an ID. A lot of people, trust me, for every sketchy thing you want to do, there is a sketchy service provider who doesn't want to check it. There's a whole list of IPs and host providers that are blocked by Spamhaus and other blacklisting sites solely because they know people just register them for spam, for and for other illicit purposes. So they get blocked because they basically say, well, we don't give a shit what our people are doing. We're just a provider of a service. We don't have any legal responsibility for what they do. If somebody comes and complains, then we can be like, oh, okay, and we'll slow roll ourselves into taking them offline. But the reality is that for any sketchy thing you want to do, you'll be able to find somebody to do it. Other mistakes he made was reusing identities online, both using using the same usernames across spaces, right? If you go Google search, for any handle you ever used, it will take you 5 seconds, right, to find where it's been used in multiple places. So unless you have a really common one where everybody uses it, yeah, just start registering accounts in other people's handles, I guess. And the other thing, another thing, it's slightly less crazy, and I think this is one of those ones where this goes back to the how paranoid are you, right? So one of the things they managed to do was trace back the VPN connections that were being used, and they traced them back to wireless hotspots near a friend's house that he was staying at, or supposedly staying at. So this goes to this idea of, people, if you're going to do that and you're going to be that lazy about it, maybe you should find, a hotspot that's not next door to your house. Just a thought. Excuse me. So creating your plan. So first is your physical identity. In our interactions here, we're identified by our names, our appearances. When you go to a store and buy anything, that method of payment, right? If you're using credit cards, that's easily trackable information. The equipment that we use, right? So any work or anything that we do where if you're doing anything with your laptop or you're doing anything with your cell phone, right? That device, there are ways for that to be tied back to whatever it was you were doing. So the thing with the physical identity, right, is that it's harder to protect than alter, right? For you to go alter your appearance, you need a lot of money and a really good plastic surgeon, or a really good makeup artist, I guess. Right, and so this goes back to the whole idea, the concept of, as we were discussing before, the fake IDs, right? That's something that, the legality on that goes through the roof, because now if you're like, oh, well, I've got fake IDs so that it's easier for me to go cheat on my spouse, well, now you've just gone from, I might get busted by my wife with a frying pan to I might get busted by my local police or, federal government because I'm making fake IDs. So your identity online, right? So again, the handles that you use, your personas, your email addresses, the IPs that you access from. The difference with your identity online versus your physical identity is it's much easier to alter this information, right? It's much easier to add these methods to make yourself anonymous and to avoid the same sort of pitfalls that you would have in the physical realm, right? So whether that's using Tor, using VPNs, using different equipment, which kind of is where that cross between the physical and the online happens, and taking that information. So that's, your payment methods online are also, now that you've got Bitcoin and Dogecoin and CryptoCoin, and is there still like the DEFCON coin thing? Like how many fucking cryptocurrencies are there at this point? Does anybody know? I mean, like I looked the other day and I was like, holy crap! What did everybody and their mother decide they needed a cryptocurrency? So. Okay, so we need a cryptocurrency exchange at this point. Yeah. So. Hey, a slide I didn't finish. Go figure. And it's in the middle. It's in the middle. I was looking through last night. Oh, everything's good. Everything's good. And here's one I forgot. So protecting your identity, right? So obviously the first thing I put was avoiding cross-contamination, right? So if you're going to do stuff online, so this goes back to the Dread Power Roberts instance, right? Which is if you're going to have a handle that you use on a forums and everybody knows that's your handle, right? So as I mentioned when I started this, the handle l0stkn0wledge. I sure as shit am not going to go register 800 things and then go on to the Tor and then start going to, start.
What's the newest version of Silk Road?
Yeah, whatever we replace Silk Road with, as a version 5.0, and use that same handle there, right? And I'm not going to use one I've used anywhere else. Like I know what handles I've used online in the last 20 plus years. I wouldn't go around creating one that's like it. I wouldn't create one that sounds similar to it. So it's one of those things, right, of protecting that identity. And then when it comes to physically, right, that's again it's the harder thing to do. But if you're doing stuff, right, where, okay, well, if you're at the paranoid level where it's like, well, I'm going to go to this Wi-Fi spot, I'm going to go to Starbucks, and then I'm going to go connect to Tor and use VPN, and I've taken all these measures. Well, now somebody, if they tie it back to that Starbucks and they're like, well, and cops show up, right? And they're like, hey, we're wondering about this person. They say, yeah, there was this really, strange looking guy who was here, yeah, for like every day for like 2 months. He always sat in the same spot. He was just sitting there staring at his computer, right? It's this idea of blending in and not being obvious. So it's protecting it from the physical perspective, right? One of the things is if you have some identifying item that you can easily hide, say like a tattoo that says, "My name is Bob," or "Heart Stephanie forever," or whatever, right? Maybe you have this wicked tattoo of like the troll face on your back. I don't care. But the point is, right, if you have something like that that's easily identifiable and people will remember and recognize, you're more likely to have a situation where somebody's going to be able to tie stuff back to you physically. People are very forgettable. There have been a lot of studies where they've shown that people make horrible eyewitnesses to crimes because we don't remember. We have a really hard time remembering the minutia of, oh well, yeah, that guy had like brown hair and he may have been like 5 feet, or maybe it was 6 feet tall. And, a prime example of me is people ask me sometimes, well, how tall were they? I was like, shorter than me. And they're like, well, that didn't eliminate a lot of people. I'm like, well, I'm sorry. That's, for me, that scope is right. It's hard to tell, oh yeah, there was this person who was like, I don't know, he was like 5'2", 5'6", somewhere in here. Like, he was this tall, I think,
Your gauges are, I had to look at the top of his head.
Yeah.
He looked at me eye to eye, and I was amazed. I looked up at him.
Yes. I mean,
Got great hair.
yeah. What hair I have left. So
There goes the rest of it.
yeah. It's well gone. So when you make acquisitions, right? So obviously when we go and get anything in this world, we almost always do it with money. There are still people who do things through barter. People still trade, but money is the prime factor for getting anything, right? The no-brainer is not to use credit cards, right? In real world, physical world situations, it's cash all the time, right? You're almost never going to find a place that won't take cash. So if you need to buy a computer, if you need to buy, a prepaid phone or a prepaid mobile hotspot, those things are easy to acquire with cash, right? In cases where you do have to use credit cards, gift cards are the greatest thing in the history of mankind. You can buy them with cash. Most places will take them just the same as they will any other credit card because in their mind, they're backed by Visa, they're backed by MasterCard, they're backed by American Express. The cash has already been laid down. They're going to take it. They don't really care. For online transactions, you're a little more limited because it's kind of hard to hand somebody cash through a computer screen, but that's where cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin come in, and again, the gift cards. The gift cards are fairly universal, and more times than not, they will accept them blindly. And the other important thing is, especially with online stuff, if you're using gift cards, nothing's ever going to validate the name. You might have to give it an address, and it may validate against an address, but since the card's not registered to an actual person or to an actual address, that's where finding things where it's just like, here, let's go find this Walmart in Topeka, Kansas, and that's where I'm going to register it, right? More times than not, all they're going to do is validate that the address is an actual physical address somewhere, if they even do that, and they may not. So what Ashley Madison teaches us about money is that people are stupid. There are over 9.3 million credit transactions performed. The only information they have is the last 4 of the cards and the dumps. So to validate the cards as being gift cards versus being actual credit cards is not possible in all cases. There are I say definitively about 200, slightly less than 200,000 gift cards, where people actually put in, when they paid for the gift card, a gift card recipient or a gift for you. Like they actually read the stupid like embossed lettering on the gift card and put that in. They didn't like put in Bob Jones, which is fine. You're staying anonymous. You're just being a little too literal. Even when people were using gift cards and kind of doing it right, they were still using their real email addresses. There were some who were still using real physical addresses that didn't tie to some generic spot. Now, it doesn't mean it was necessarily theirs. I can't validate that because I don't know their name. I don't know where they were. But the reality is they were still using, they weren't putting gibberish in an email field, or if it was just tying to the email that they had registered as, whenever they registered, they didn't create some obviously fake email address for it. And then a lot of them were still connected from home. A lot of the IPs were still reporting as ISP block IPs. So people were still just connecting from their home computers and doing the purchases that way. Some of them, like I said, some of them got it right. At least their wife won't see the credit card bill. And so, right, so again, this goes to the paranoia factor and the level, right? If these people assume that their data was safe with Ashley Madison and that, nobody's ever going to dump the information, I don't need to worry about my email or my real address being in there. All my wife's ever going to look for is the credit card receipts, right? So, when you're doing anything like this, is the idea of equipment, right? Don't reuse equipment, period. Computers are cheap, really, really, really cheap, and used ones are even cheaper. Prepaid wireless, again, is cheap. If you don't want to go use free hotspots everywhere, pretty much everybody from Verizon to T-Mobile to AT&T, Walmart has the Straight Talk Wireless. They all have the mobile hotspots that you can get prepaid. You can pay cash for them. You can buy the charging cards for them, and you can pay cash for those. And so you can pay cash for that internet access. And the other kind of nice thing, if you haven't looked, is as we've been running out of IPv4 space, all those ISPs are natting your public IP address. So it's not, I got this IP for this router, and I know it was within 5 feet of here of this wireless hotspot. I know, this is in, Nashville, Tennessee. No, what you might wind up with is, you have a Verizon hotspot. Okay, well, we natted the IP. Here's the IP that we gave you, and they usually nat with a 10-dot network. And, it geolocates roughly to Murfreesboro, right? So wherever they're taking all those into, and, obviously it varies from area to area, it's not going to be like the IP geolocation isn't going to be as precise as it probably was, a few years ago. They're not going to have, there's not going to be this IP block where the provider has this IP block for a certain area because they're always going to be, because they're all natting now. And again, from the money lessons, cash, and more cash. That's just the way to go. So what Ashley Madison teaches about equipment, and I know this one looks incomplete, but really it's not. The biggest thing it taught us is that there were a lot of people who like to use their BlackBerries and registered from BlackBerries. There was a large chunk of IPs, and I think I have another slide that mentions this too. Large block of IPs where registration came from blocks that are held by BlackBerry, like 20,000 plus accounts, and that was without me going through every last one. Those were just the ones that were on the high end of the IPs that were used. So ladies, if your husband traveled a lot and had a corporate BlackBerry, maybe you should ask him. So if you need equipment, what are your shopping options? Well, anywhere taking cash is always good. Retail stores aplenty. If you're hacking on a budget, there's lots of places you can go, right? Sometimes you'll find stuff at Goodwill, Salvation Army, flea markets, Craigslist comes to mind too. Right? Craigslist is probably slightly, well, I only say slightly more difficult just because you do already have to have some sort of online presence to be able to pull it off, right? But Craigslist does try to keep your email private, at least between you and the person you're contacting with. So even if you had an email that you use once and never use again, just for that transaction. Some more shopping options once you've kind of got an online persona and you're using it for a specific thing. Amazon and Walmart have both done this great thing where you don't even have to ship shit to your house anymore. So you want to make orders, just have it show up at an Amazon locker. I don't know that they were in every 7-Eleven, but back in Northern Virginia, they were damn near in every 7-Eleven. And there's a lot more elsewhere. You can pretty much get anything shipped to the locker. And again, if you've gone through the habit of building the online persona, getting something shipped and sent there, it doesn't matter. Nobody's validating that again. Yep.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
I like the sound of my own voice. Have you ever used one of those? Has anybody here ever used one of the lockers?
I've never seen one around here.
Well, we're kind of southern Potomac, but
I don't know if I
Anybody on the other side of the Mason-Dixon line? See
so
anybody
I've never
use
I've
it?
never used one personally, the Amazon lockers. I've seen, and almost every, the Walmart ones I've seen everywhere. I mean, and they're in all the Walmarts.
I mean, we've got a fulfillment center around here, but I've never seen an Amazon locker.
I can't wait to order a really large duffel bag filled with something.
Only the finest Colombian cookie.
So,
I don't use those for my coat.
right, but
do they, is it like, I don't know if there's a size limitation on what you
so
actually get to
it
that,
really
but-
it depends, right? So like I know Walmart, and you can see kind of in this far edge here, there's like two like half height lockers down there. So I mean, there is some level of size restriction, right? Like you're not going to get like a
Coffin.
yeah, you're not going to get like a coffin unless it's a really tiny coffin in one of those. But again, so there is some size restriction, right? But if you're ordering anything like additional computers or equipment or stuff to upgrade your computer, right? That's all going to fit in boxes that are small.
How does it work?
So basically the way they work is you make the order, and then they both have touch screens in the middle of them, and essentially you show up and you say, oh, I'm here to pick up order X, you provide the order information. I believe they wind up either giving you, I think it's just straight up order information, so you type whatever, like, hey, I need to look up my order, it's supposed to be under, Bob Johnson, or, here's the card I use, so if you use the gift card, swipe the gift card, and it will just read the numbers off and find that order that matches that. So in many ways, I think it works pretty similar to how the online ticketing systems work when you purchase your movie tickets, right? You buy it, you show up at the kiosk, you swipe your credit card. Yeah.
Well, at that point, it doesn't matter if it's not secure. There's your legal, when you record like, I didn't touch it, someone
Yeah.
else did it.
How do you know I picked it up, right? Right. Well, so definitely. So at the Walmart in particular, there's definitely going to be, right, because if you ever walked into Walmart and looked up, and if you do that too long, people start following you around the store, and you look up, there's cameras, everywhere, and yeah, there's definitely going to be cameras there, and these tend to usually be near the customer service center where people are already going to be going to do normal online order pickups. The Amazon lockers, I think it really depends. There is, I believe, a camera that's actually in the like console where you'd go to do the pickup and put the information in. But is somebody watching? Is there an actual camera watching the lockers? If somebody was, say, able to open a locker without going through that process, that probably depends on the facility, because unlike the Walmart version, which Walmart controls the store, they control where they're located. The Amazon lockers are usually going into other facilities, right? So there's no guarantee that whatever convenience store or other location they're being put in has a camera that's pointing directly at them. I'm sure Amazon wants there to be. That doesn't mean there is. Yep.
You know if they have cameras built on them like ATMs?
No, that's what I was saying. I do believe there's one, and you can kind of see it in the picture in the center of the Amazon one. There's a little black circle above the control panel.
Just got it up real low.
Yeah. So if you're really tall and it just gets a picture of your chest, right? Just have on a funny T-shirt for them to read.
Wife go pick up stuff.
Right. Well, or that's just it, right? Have somebody else go pick it up. If it's in a 7-Eleven, go find the guy who's sitting outside who wants money and be like, here's $20, go in and get this thing out of the machine and bring it back to me, right? You can get people who do a lot of things for you for money. Some legal and some illegal, by the way. Yeah. But again, so a point to make though, right, is anything that you purchase in this method, anything you get this way that was tied to something that you bought, if you're at that high level of paranoia, then it's it's not then, remember that whenever you get rid of whatever you acquired the item with, that you get rid of whatever it is you acquired too. Right? Because the second that you think that something's happened and that somebody might know that, you were using this computer, well, if you bought something else, if you bought another computer from there, there's, potential somebody could figure that chain out, right? It's all about how paranoid you want to be. I'm going to say that a few more times, I'm sure. So getting online. Internet. It's really free or really cheap, depending on what you want to do and where your morality levels lie. There's lots of free Wi-Fi hotspots. There's lots, as I was saying before, lots of prepaid options. And there's lots of really unsecure wireless. I am not advocating you go and crack your neighbor's wireless. But the reality is, if you're already in some level of moral ambiguity, how far do you take it? So, again, getting online is easy. You do not have to connect at your house. VPN. So, how much privacy really depends on your providers, how much logging they're doing, what they're actually looking at. Odds are you're still going to have some sort of information that identifies you, right? Whether it's the profile and the username and password, whether it's a certificate they issue to you, whatever method they're doing to authenticate you to that service. VPN is great because it encrypts your information, but again, it doesn't necessarily provide any real anonymity because there still has to be some way for you to authenticate and connect to that service. The only anonymity you can really build in is having an identity, having a persona that isn't tied to you or tied to your name. And again, when we were talking before about sketchy providers, there are some really sketchy VPN providers. Probably more so than most anything else. Tor is another one that always comes up. Great for anonymity, horrible for security, because if you've done any reading, you'll see there's been lots of times where they're just bad exit nodes, right? You don't know who's listening, and whoever is listening can easily mess with the data that you're getting back. So it's great for being anonymous. It's not great for necessarily being secure, which is why the two are combined a lot. And there actually are VPN services that support it, where they'll be like, yeah, we'll actually let you VPN when you route through the Tor network. You usually take a performance hit because anybody who's ever used Tor knows it's really slow. But another option is always to build your own solutions, but again, this goes back to the whole OpSec, right? If you're going to build a VPN server and you're going to get a VPS, to do that, it's more stuff that you leave behind in your wake. It's a larger imprint you're making, right? So you're like, well, I feel safer because I have control of everything I'm doing, but at the same time, now you have more stuff to worry about. And again, it's all about how paranoid you are. So the VPN. So there's a lot, and I do mean a lot, of AOL accounts that show up as the AOL mapped proxies. It could be a lot of AOL users. I mean, it's possible. Odds are it's also other people who are using it to try to connect in. If you're trying to avoid your spouse, this might actually work, because the reality is if they know your service provider is, Comcast or AT&T or whoever, and they see the dumps, they may not necessarily be able to tie two and two together. From the people I know and I've talked to in the past who have worked at AOL, they have a pretty good idea of who's coming in and who's going out of their network. So if they got involved, they'd figure out who you were. The people, some of the people I put here scammers, but criminals and based in Eastern Europe and in Asia love to use AOL and connect in as a form of proxy, so they look like they're coming out of the U.S. They think they're not being watched or that they won't be caught, or they just don't care because they have 1,000 of these 500 free hours CDs. I don't know, but they're big fans of it, and so but again, like I said, having talked to some of the people who I know who used to work there, and some of them who may still, they actually do have a pretty good idea what goes on through their network. Hey, here's the Blackberries again. So As a stat I have here, over 20,000 Ashley Madison accounts, and with the BlackBerry IPs. And so this comes back to where's the monitoring. So I don't know if this is I kind of wondered if, did corporations just go, yeah, we're just not going to care where people are going on their BlackBerries, or if this was just a lot of personal BlackBerries, or if anybody was even, looking. But yeah, a lot of people were registering with BlackBerries. There's a lot of BlackBerry, email addresses. So BlackBerry was apparently, I don't know, I guess people really liked it. They didn't think, oh, my spouse never looks at that phone anyway. VPSs, so I kind of touched this earlier. They're cheap and easy to access, quick, easy to dispose. If you used one and you had it as, well, I have a laptop and I'm going to connect here. If you, depending on your level of paranoia, if you're doing something like just cheating on your spouse or something research-oriented, then going and having to get a new laptop every time may not be as high up on your priority list, right? But something important is not to cross the streams. So unless you're trying to close an interdimensional door, apparently. Emails. There's lots of free options. So why in the hell are you using your Comcast email address? Most require no validation. In fact, I know for a fact that Gmail still does not. I've heard some people say, oh, well, you have to have a phone. If you try to create your account from a known, what Google knows is as a proxy or an external or a very common shared point, then they will almost always ask you for a credit card. But there's still places you can connect through, and some Tor exit nodes you can come out of where they don't have it registered as such yet, so you don't need a phone. And even if you do need a phone, prepaid phones are cheap. They're easy to use, and it's like 1 5-second phone call with Gmail, validate the information, and then toss the phone. You'll never use it again. Mail.com, I don't think even tries to do validation at any level. Yahoo, I know, does. And I have it registered an Outlook.com email address. It's kind of like the old Hotmail that people still use that. Again, so what were they thinking? Lots of corporate emails were used, people's business addresses, and again, it's not a foolproof method to identify anybody, but it is clear that there are a lot of really stupid people who still did it anyway. There's a whole long list of emails that are basically like somebody's phone number at whatever. So I think for T-Mobile it would be like mms.tmomail.com or whatever it is. There's a whole string of addresses like that were used as registrations in these. So in addition to all the other information, you might have a lot of people's phone numbers too. I've not tried to validate, and there are a lot of those that are overseas, a lot of Europe and a lot of, I believe Korea, where this apparently seemed to be really popular. I don't know. Again, the BlackBerry emails, a lot of school emails, and then there's the what the fuck. There were over 12,000 .mil emails used. There are a lot of fake gibberish addresses in there. There are a lot that look perfectly legitimate. I'm not an expert on what are the legitimate .mil addresses, but that's just a rough breakdown of some of the services that were there, Army, Navy, and Air Force. There were about another 2,200 .gov addresses. This breaks down to state and federal employees because a lot of the states also have .gov addresses. A few honorable mentions are up here. The NSA, 3 of them were clearly faked. There was like one that was like admin at NSA.gov, if that's a legitimate. Yeah, you know that guy? The postmaster at NSA.gov. There was one called I Trust You Not at NSA.gov. So of those, there's only one that looked like it could potentially be legitimate. 2 were CIA, 7 are FBI. Again, only 2 appear to be legitimate. So there are some Senate.gov emails, but again, without the validation, there's no way to clearly tell, is this, just they actually register it as somebody just making it up? Because all those emails, right, are public knowledge, right? Yeah. My favorite was DHS, which had over 57. I didn't go through all 57, but a lot of them did appear legitimate. So I don't know if the DHS.gov domain includes all the TSA employees who might have emails. But yeah.
Do you know anything about Weave's claims about the Department of Justice? Do you know anything about Weave's claims about the Department of Justice prosecutors that were on Ashley Madison?
So I didn't look through. I didn't look through any of their information to see. And again, so I was just kind of running through some of the different organizations. So obviously, I didn't break down all 2,200.gov addresses or go through the name information, so I can't validate or any of the claims. But as I've said a few times, you can't trust the emails. If we trusted the emails, we would think he had one. We would think he had one. We'd think he'd have one. He might have one, actually. But here's why we can't trust it. In that FBI email list, he had one. So there was a Fox Mulder at FBI registered email. So
Does Ashley Madison not do email verification?
no, Ashley Madison did no email verification whatsoever. So
Small town mayor, that the small town that I live in actually resigned over this.
yeah. So the funny thing is, the other thing, and I didn't, I meant to capture one of the other slides and I forgot to. The funny thing about this is, right, that a lot of if you look through the credit card purchases, there's something, I think there's like, what did I say, like about 9.5 million of them. There's probably only a million or less unique people making those purchases. A lot of the purchases, when you go through the dump, you will see the same names over and over and over again, making purchases over and over and over again. Okay. So, a couple of truths about all this. Paranoia, as I've said over and over and over again. A lot of this is overkill. If you're cheating on your spouse, odds are you wouldn't need to do half of this. Odds are if you're doing most anything, I've seen what a lot of corporations consider network monitoring, you wouldn't have to do this. I forget where I was going. Totally lost my track of thought. Right. So again, it's all about what you're doing, who you're worried about being seen by. That's going to be your bigger thing. For people who are looking for ways to cheat, old-fashioned cheating is much cheaper. I tried long and hard to find that picture, damn it. Listen, the reality is sites like Ashley Madison charged a lot of money for very little results. If you're trying to be paranoid and you're going to have a burner phone, you're going to have a separate computer, you're going to have VPNs, you're going to do all this stuff, it's all going to cost you money. You're still going to have a lot of the same expenses as cheating normally. You're still going to have to find some sketchy hotel to meet up with her at. You're still going to have random bar dates. You're still going to be looking for your divorce attorney at some point. Just save your goddamn money and go to a bar and pick up some other sad, drunk person who's there with you. Trust me, I would imagine that probably more people probably cheated on their spouse last year by picking up somebody at a bar than they did from Ashley Madison. A lot of this is just common sense. It just is. So I am running out of time, but the good news is I actually managed to fit it into my time. So are there any other questions I can try to answer?
So I got one. So you were talking about buying a laptop or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's almost, you wonder whether Walmart, if you went and picked up, like I bought an HP to run Kali on a couple of months ago, whether the serial numbers are actually tracked all the way to the Walmart. So, a level of paranoia, you could go to another state on a trip, buy one there, any kind of obfuscation.
I would be surprised if they're not, seeing as, and maybe they aren't, because I get why, one of the examples I'm going to use here in my head is when you look at like the food recalls, right? They can always say, oh, I know exactly what stores all these things were shipped to, right? Now, granted, there's a lot more health and medical things involved, or if there's a food poisoning thing that you have to track, so maybe there is just more mandated tracking. But I think also, yeah, right, yeah. So not only that, but right, all the companies and their distributors, if you've ever looked, a lot of places also have their own model numbers of things. So never buy from a shopping club, never buy from Costco or Sam's Club. They almost always have their own model versions of equipment, so that their stuff can't be used to price match to other things. So so you need to be aware of things like that, because even if they're like, okay, well, we tracked down this serial number. Oh, we know it's this model thing. Oh, well, now we know it went to Costco. Okay, well, now we know there's a member who went, there's some Costco member somewhere, right? Or somebody who bought it off somebody from Costco, right? Which is why secondhand is good, so long as, I guess you could always buy some. You know what? When you get done, go sell your, oh yeah, I use this to hack everything computer secondhand to some schmuck off Craigslist. So when they do come looking for you, they'll be like, oh my God.
Well, I was going to say, really good, operational security can be expensive when you make the mention of you verify the Gmail and then toss the phone. I mean, you're talking $20, $30 at a minimum to have an operational phone and then toss it.
Clearance, twice a year.
Dude, what is it?
Yeah, Toys R Us clearance.
Toys R Us clearance.
I have
Keep that in mind.
I have four. Yeah. Not a whole rubber container. There's like 4 or 5, paid $5 a piece for. They were on clearance because this was 2 years ago. They weren't going to carry the prepaid cell phones anymore, and they were all on clearance. And people in a Toys R Us in particular, they walk in there and they're like, they aren't thinking, oh, I need to buy a cell phone. So these things went from being like $30, $40 to like $20, $30, and then I'd go back a few weeks later, and they were now down into single digits. And it's like, you know what? I will buy this rack of phones. Yeah. Don't ask what for.
There's
So.
a really, really interesting thing, which is that track phones actually,
Keep talking.
track phones actually come preloaded with, I think, around 10 minutes on them and a phone number. So if you're looking for it just to verify an email address, you can pick one up for about $5.
Yeah.
But phone sex for me takes longer than 10 minutes, so I mean.
So,
Sorry, dude.
it's one of those things, right? So it's all about what you want. So, thank you, everybody.